Queen Esther, the secret agent who saved a nation. What if I told you that one of history's greatest undercover operations was carried out not by a trained spy, but by a young Jewish woman who infiltrated the most powerful court in the ancient world? What if I told you that this woman single-handedly prevented the first Holocaust, 1,900 years before Hitler was even born? Her code name in the Persian court, Esther. Her real name, Hadassah. Her mission, impossible. This is the story of a woman who played the ultimate long game, turning beauty into a weapon and saving an entire people from extinction. But here's what they don't teach you in Sunday school. Esther's story is far more complex, dangerous, and brilliant than you've ever imagined. By the end of this video, you'll understand why Queen Esther wasn't just a pretty face who got lucky. She was a master strategist, a political genius, and quite possibly the greatest undercover agent in ancient history. The year is approximately 486 BCE. The Persian Empire stretched from India to Ethiopia, 127 provinces under one man's rule. This isn't just big. This is the largest empire the world has ever seen. At its heart sits Susa, one of the most magnificent cities ever built, where our story unfolds. The emperor? Xerxes, known in Hebrew as Ahasuerus. This is the same Xerxes who would later march a 1,000,000-man army against Greece. This is a man who doesn't just have power, he is power incarnate. But here's the first secret most people miss. Xerxes wasn't just some Persian king making random decisions. He was ruling during one of the most politically volatile periods in ancient history. The Greeks were rising, rebellions were constant, and the empire was stretched to its limits. Every decision he made could reshape the world. Into this powder keg of politics and power walks our heroine. But Esther isn't walking into this story as herself. She's walking in under deep cover. The Jewish people had been scattered across this empire for decades. They were refugees, exiles, survivors of conquest. They had no homeland, no army, no political power. They had only their faith, their families, and their hope of survival. And unknown to anyone in that glittering Persian court, they were about to find their salvation in the most unlikely place, the emperor's bedroom. Here's where the story gets its first twist. What most people think they know is that there was a beauty contest to replace Queen Vashti. What actually happened was far more calculated and sinister. This wasn't America's Next Top Model. This was a systematic collection of young women from across the empire. Think about it. 127 provinces, each forced to send their most beautiful young women to the capital. We're talking about hundreds, possibly thousands of girls, taken from their families and brought to Susa. But here's secret number one that changes everything. Esther didn't volunteer for this. She was conscripted. The text says she was taken to the palace. This wasn't an opportunity. It was an abduction sanctioned by imperial law. Enter Mordecai, Esther's older cousin and adoptive father. Now here's where it gets interesting. Most people see Mordecai as just a concerned relative. But look deeper. Mordecai is positioned at the king's gate. This isn't some random job. In ancient Persia, the king's gate was the center of political power. Only high-ranking officials and those with serious political connections worked there. Mordecai wasn't just some Jewish exile scraping by. He was a political insider, someone who understood how the system worked. And when his cousin was taken into the royal harem, he didn't panic, he planned. The first thing he tells Esther, don't reveal your identity. Don't tell anyone you're Jewish. Why? Because Mordecai understood something crucial. Information is power, and the most powerful information is the information your enemies don't know you have. From the moment Esther walked into that palace, she was operating under false identity. For 4 years, she maintained perfect operational security. No one suspected, no one knew. She was the ultimate sleeper agent. Now let's talk about what those 4 years really meant. The text mentions beauty treatments, oil of myrrh for 6 months, perfumes and cosmetics for 6 more months. But this wasn't just a spa day. This was intensive training. These women were being prepared to interact with the most powerful man in the world. They were learning court protocol, Persian customs, political etiquette, languages, arts, and probably intelligence gathering. This was finishing school for future queens and concubines. But while all the other women were trying to catch the king's attention, Esther was playing a completely different game. She had an advantage none of them knew about. She had an intelligence network. Every single day, Mordecai walked by the court of the women's house to learn about Esther's welfare. But think about this strategically. Mordecai wasn't just checking up on family. He was running an intelligence operation. He was passing information to his asset inside the palace. Esther knew about political movements, palace gossip, who was rising and falling in power. While other women were focused on beauty and charm, Esther was building a comprehensive understanding of Persian politics. And here's secret number 2. When Esther finally met King Xerxes, she didn't just happen to please him. She had spent 4 years learning exactly what would please him. She knew his preferences, his personality, his political pressures. When the moment came, she didn't just look beautiful. She became exactly what he needed her to be. The text says, the king loved Esther more than all the other women. But love in royal courts isn't about romance. It's about utility, compatibility, and political advantage. Esther had made herself indispensable. But even as Queen of Persia, she maintained her cover. She still didn't reveal her true identity, because she understood that her real mission hadn't even begun yet. Enter Haman the Agagite, and here's where our thriller begins. Most people know Haman as the bad guy who hated Jews. But let's dig deeper into who Haman really was, and why his plan was so terrifyingly brilliant. First, Haman wasn't just some random official. He was promoted to be second in command of the entire Persian Empire. This man had real power, real influence, and real access to the king. But here's secret number 3, and this one's crucial. Haman's hatred of the Jews wasn't personal, it was political. Haman was an Agagite, meaning he was descended from Agag, the Amalekite king. The Amalekites and the Israelites had been enemies for over 500 years. This wasn't just prejudice. This was an ancient blood feud finally coming to a head. When Mordecai refused to bow to Haman, he wasn't just being stubborn. Mordecai understood exactly who Haman was and what he represented. This was a declaration of war disguised as a show of respect. But Haman's response reveals his true genius and true evil. He didn't just want to kill Mordecai. He wanted to eliminate the entire Jewish population of the Persian Empire. In one move, he would solve what he saw as the Jewish problem forever. Now, Pay attention to how sophisticated this plan was. Haman didn't just go to the king and say, "I hate Jews, let's kill them." He presented it as a security issue. He told Xerxes, "There is a certain people scattered throughout your kingdom whose laws are different from everyone else's. They don't obey the king's laws. It's not in the king's interest to tolerate them." This is Propaganda 101. Haman made the Jews sound like a security threat, like a fifth column that couldn't be trusted. And then, and this is brilliant in its evil, he offered to pay for the entire operation himself. 10,000 talents of silver. That's roughly 375 tons of silver, worth hundreds of millions in today's money. Xerxes' response is chilling. Keep the money and do with the people as you please. The king of the Persian Empire just authorized genocide and refused payment for it. This wasn't just about money or politics anymore. This was about the complete annihilation of the Jewish people. The decree was written, sealed with the king's ring, and sent to every province. On the 13th day of the 12th month, every Jew in the Persian Empire, men, women, children, infants, would be killed. Their property would be seized. It would be open season on Jewish people. And here's the most terrifying part. It was completely legal. This was imperial law, backed by the full power of the Persian military. The first Holocaust had been authorized. When news of the decree reached the provinces, the Jewish people were devastated. But Mordecai understood something crucial. They had one asset, one person on the inside who might be able to change everything. But approaching Queen Esther wasn't simple. Remember, she was still maintaining her cover. Even Mordecai couldn't just walk up to the Queen of Persia and have a casual conversation about Jewish politics. So Mordecai did something dramatic. He put on sackcloth and ashes and mourned publicly at the king's gate. This wasn't just grief. This was a signal. He was communicating with his asset, using a method that would get her attention without compromising her cover. When Esther heard about Mordecai's behavior, she sent clothes for him to wear instead of the sackcloth. But Mordecai refused them and sent back a message through intermediaries. A copy of the written decree and instructions for Esther to go to the king and plead for her people. Now here's where Esther reveals just how intelligent she really was. Her first response wasn't, "Yes, of course." It was a strategic analysis.
Anyone who approaches the king without being summoned is put to death, unless the king extends his golden scepter. And I haven't been summoned to see the king for 30 days. Think about what this means. Even as queen, Esther couldn't just walk into the king's presence. Persian court protocol was rigid and deadly. One wrong move, and she'd be executed on the spot. But there's something deeper here. Esther hadn't been summoned for 30 days. In a court where access to the king meant everything, this could mean her influence was waning. It could mean she was already falling out of favor. Going to the king uninvited wasn't just dangerous. It might be suicide. Mordecai's response is one of the most powerful speeches in ancient literature. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this? Let's break this down. Mordecai is telling Esther 4 crucial things. 1. Your cover won't save you. When they come for the Jews, being queen won't protect you. 2. This genocide will be stopped with or without you. God will find another way. 3. But if you don't act, you'll die anyway, and so will everyone you care about. 4. Maybe, just maybe, everything that's happened to you has been building to this moment. This is the moment when Esther has to decide, remain safe in her false identity or risk everything to save her people. Esther's response reveals her true genius. Gather all the Jews in Susa and fast for me for 3 days. I and my maids will fast as well. Then I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. But don't mistake this for reckless heroism. Esther isn't just throwing herself on the king's mercy. She's buying time to plan. 3 days of fasting wasn't just spiritual preparation. It was strategic planning time. Esther was about to execute one of the most sophisticated political operations in ancient history. When Esther finally approaches the king, every detail matters. She puts on her royal robes. This isn't just getting dressed. This is psychological warfare. She's reminding Xerxes exactly who she is and what she represents. She stands in the inner court, where the king can see her. This is calculated. She's not bursting in. She's making herself visible and waiting for his response. And it works. The king extends the golden scepter and offers her up to half his kingdom. But here's where Esther's genius really shines. Instead of immediately pleading for her people, she invites the king and Haman to a banquet. Think about this strategically. Esther has just risked her life to approach the king, and when he offers her anything she wants, she asks him to dinner. This seems anticlimactic until you understand what she's really doing. Esther is separating the king and Haman from their advisors, their guards, their usual power structure. She's creating an intimate setting where she controls the environment. But even at the first banquet, when the king again offers her anything up to half his kingdom, she doesn't make her request. Instead, she invites them to a second banquet the next day. Why wait? Because Esther understands something crucial about human psychology. Timing is everything. She's building suspense. She's making the king curious. She's also giving Haman enough rope to hang himself with. And that's exactly what happens. After the first banquet, Haman is feeling confident. He's been honored by the queen. He's got the king's ear, and his plan to eliminate the Jews is moving forward. So when he sees Mordecai still refusing to bow to him, he doesn't just get angry. He gets stupid. Haman decides he can't wait for the general massacre. He's going to execute Mordecai immediately. He builds a gallows 75 feet high. This isn't just an execution device. It's a monument to his hatred. He plans to ask the king's permission the next morning to hang Mordecai on it. But Esther has calculated perfectly. While Haman is building his gallows, she's preparing her trap. Here's where the story takes an almost supernatural turn. That same night, the king can't sleep. So he asks for the royal chronicles to be read to him. And they happen to read about the time Mordecai saved the king's life by exposing an assassination plot. The king asks, "What honor has been given to Mordecai for this?" Answer, "Nothing." The next morning, when Haman comes to ask permission to hang Mordecai, the king asks him, "What should be done for the man the king wants to honor?" Haman, thinking the king wants to honor him, describes an elaborate ceremony. Royal robes, the king's horse, a crown, and a public proclamation. "Excellent," says the king. "Do this for Mordecai the Jew." The hunter has become the hunted. The man who planned to execute Mordecai is now forced to publicly honor him. The final gambit, 10 p.m. to 1:30 a.m. At the second banquet, Esther finally makes her move. But even here, she's strategic about every word. She doesn't start by identifying herself as Jewish. She starts by appealing to the king's self-interest. If I have found favor with you, and if it pleases the king, grant me my life. This is my petition. And spare my people. This is my request. She makes it personal first. Then she reveals the scope of the threat. For I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated. But here's the master stroke. If we had merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept quiet, because no such distress would justify disturbing the king. She's telling Xerxes that she wouldn't bother him with slavery, but genocide? That's worth interrupting his dinner for. When the king asks who would dare do such a thing, Esther delivers the killing blow. An adversary and enemy, this vile Haman. The king is so furious he leaves the room, and Haman, in his panic, falls on Esther's couch to beg for mercy, which looks like an assault on the queen. The king returns and says, "Will he even molest the queen while she is with me in the house?" It's over. Haman is executed on the very gallows he built for Mordecai. But Esther's work isn't finished. The original decree can't be revoked. Persian law is unchangeable. So Esther and Mordecai have to craft a counter-decree, giving the Jews the right to defend themselves and destroy their enemies. The result? Instead of being victims of genocide, the Jewish people become the victors. They eliminate their enemies throughout the empire. To commemorate this reversal of fortune, Esther and Mordecai establish the festival of Purim, a celebration that continues to this day, over 2,400 years later. Queen Esther's story isn't just about one woman saving her people. It's about the power of strategic thinking, perfect timing, and incredible courage. She spent 4 years maintaining deep cover in the most dangerous court in the world. She turned her beauty into a weapon, her position into power, and her silence into strength. When the moment came, she didn't just react. She executed a plan so sophisticated that it not only saved her people, but completely reversed their fortunes. Esther transformed the Jewish people from victims to victors, from refugees to rulers of their own destiny. The next time someone tells you Queen Esther was just a pretty girl who got lucky, you tell them the truth. She was one of history's greatest strategic minds, operating under the deepest cover, playing the longest game, and pulling off the most important victory in Jewish history. Queen Esther, the secret agent who saved a nation. If this blew your mind, smash that like button and subscribe for more hidden stories from history. What other biblical heroes do you want me to uncover? Let me know in the comments below.